Township Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting Monday, December 21st, 2020. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open, adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on December 6, 2019, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on December 6, 2019, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on December 6, 2019, said notice was posted in the office of the Zoning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. On October 5th, 2020, a notice was sent to both the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger that this meeting would be held remotely using communication equipment via Zoom due to COVID-19 restrictions. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching their decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. This meeting is videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. For those members of the public that are watching the hearing, the chairman will open up the hearing to members of the public for each application for you to ask questions or comment on an application. At that time, we will ask you to use the raise your hand feature so you can be brought into the meeting one at a time. Once there, you will need to have audio and video. You will need to be sworn in, and you will need to give your name and address. So once again, that's for each application when the chairman opens the hearing up for members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Mr. Hughes.
Here.
Mr. Mertens.
Here.
Mr. Moretti. Mr. Moretti? Mr. Moretti, you have no sound. We can't hear you, Mr. Moretti. You want to try to go out and come back in? I'll skip him for now. Mr. O'Donnell is on. Hold on one second.
There's Mr. O'Donnell. Unmute yourself.
Okay,
We're on roll call. Mr. O'Donnell,
here.
Mr. Orozco,
Here.
Mr. Saya,
Here.
Mr. Cantor,
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Here.
Chairman Nansen.
Here.
You have a quorum. I just want to see if Mr. Moretti logs back in so we can get him on the record.
Okay. Must be the Christmas solace
Maybe.
tonight.
How's that? Is that better?
That
Yeah.
is.
Huh?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you now. Thank you, Mr. Moretti.
You hear me now too?
Yes.
Are
You
you
have a-
here? Are you here?
Who, Moretti?
Yes, we're ready.
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Okay.
we got it. Thank you.
Okay, can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag
The United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just be properly, you mind swearing in the profession? please.
Before you do, Mr. Tropoli, Matt Howard is not here tonight, but he did send Mr. Aguiar, who is from our code department. Do you want to swear him in? You do?
Yes, please.
All right, hold on. Let me put him in the meeting then. He's here in case you need him. So now you have to stand up and get sworn. Okay, this is John Aguiar.
Can't hear
Ron, we
you.
can't hear you at all.
Nope.
You want to go out and come back in? Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now? There we go.
Yes, you're fine.
Thank you very much. Sorry, folks. Mr. Aguiar, Mr. Beam and Miss Beam and Mr. Conlon, please raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you'll give this evening be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
But can each of you please state your name for the record?
Jennifer Beam.
John Aguiar.
Thank you. All sworn for the evening, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Charlie, we couldn't hear you.
Oh, you're muted, Charlie. It's that kind of night.
No, you have no volume.
Yeah. He might have had the same problem I did. We logged in at the same time earlier. So I would suggest he may have to log out and come back in.
That's what happened. That's what happened to me. I logged in with about the same time Charlie did.
I think we did roll call. We all were heard, right? Yeah, so the rest of us should be okay.
Yes. Wendell, we can go, keep going until we get Charlie back.
Okay. Approval of minutes.
We have no minutes this evening.
Hey, vouchers, I noticed one.
There is one.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
Charlie.
All right, perfect.
Okay.
I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
You're welcome. Duly sworn. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll hold the voucher till the end of the hearing.
Yeah, did everybody see, was everybody able to review the voucher?
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll vote on that at the end of the meeting. Correspondence.
I have a letter from Mr. Cohen, and he's also on the hearing if he wants to address the board. It's regarding the application for Oakland Road LLC, which is the last application on tonight's agenda.
Okay. Mr. Cohen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Todd Cohen, attorney for Oakland LLC. We had earlier this week received a request for an adjournment from Mr. Gazarovski, who's representing a neighboring property owner. At first, we were not inclined to grant the request because it had previously granted a request because they were previously represented by another attorney, but he got COVID. Make a long story short, our planner couldn't make it tonight either, so we acquiesced to the request, and we're going to try and meet with the objector in the meantime. And we requested to be on the agenda for January 11th with no further notice.
And Mr. Cohen is also granted an extension of time through January 31st, 2021.
That's correct.
And how many cases do we have on the 11th now?
3,
Okay.
but
Okay. Case number BA 1926, Oakland Road LLC will be adjourned to January 11th, 2021 with no further notice at 7 o'clock. And we do have an extension of time.
Thank you,
Correct.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Okay, resolution. Case number BA 20106, Bronco Developer Inc. Resolution granting bulk variance to construct a single-family dwelling with septic system. Eligible voters: Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Saya, Cantor, Gonzalez, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Hughes,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Mertens. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes,
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
thank you. Case number BA 2120, Diane Yusko. Resolution granting bulk variance for residential driveway setback. Eligible voters: Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Saya, Cantor, Gonzalez, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Moretti,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Saya. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
Okay, the next one, 2020 yearly review and report. Mr.
Thank you.
Top.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, evidently, what I had forwarded to you was a hybrid draft from 2019, and it is not the final product. It was brought to my attention earlier this evening by Mr. Nansen, and ultimately I found a message on my voicemail from Mr. Saya. So what I propose to do, and unfortunately, I actually have in my hand, I sound like a politician here, the final draft, which is about 7 or 8 pages. So what I'd like to do at the end of the meeting, because it is important that we memorialize it, and it does incorporate the changes that we talked about, is to take 10 minutes, and I'd like to read it into the record as best as I can. Some areas I can synopsize, some are new, and see whether or not the board is comfortable with adopting it at that point in time. Again, I offer my apology. It's just something that happened, a bit of a draftsman error, but I actually don't have the ability to scan it from where I'm at. So if we can do that and reserve 10 minutes at the end of the meeting, I think we could square up all concerns, Mr. Chair.
Board members, y'all have an objection to that?
Nope.
Not at
Sounds,
all. No.
sounds good.
All right,
Mr.
thank
Saya,
you.
that good?
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hey, application before the board, case number BA 20104, Vesa 24 LLC. Hope I said that right. Use variance preliminary and final major site plan. Application of Vesa 24 LLC is applicant and Howell Solar LLC is owner, seeking a use variance preliminary final major site plan approval for the construction of 3 lithium-ion battery storage units. BESS at the rear of the existing solar array system on premises known as Block 42, Lot 36, 829 Lakewood Farmingdale Road. This application was partially heard September 14th, 2020, when it was carried to November 16th, 2020 with no further notice. On November 16th, 2020, the application was carried to December 21st, 2020 with no further notice. Expiration date, January 31st, 2021. Eligible voters: Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, O'Donnell, Orozco, Cantor, and Nansen.
And Mr. Saya has said he is certified to watch it as well,
Okay,
so he is eligible. And I believe the attorney, Mr. Yoskin, is on, and so is Mr. Smith.
okay, Mr. Yoskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Neil Yoskin from the law firm of Cullen and Dyckman from the Princeton office of that firm. This is an application for preliminary and final site plan approval with 2 D variances for a battery energy storage system consisting of 3 battery units and related equipment sitting on a concrete pad at the rear of the existing solar facility that's located at 829 Lakewood Farmingdale Road in Howell Township. That's County Road 547. The 2 variances being sought are for the installation of 2 principal uses on the same property. One is the solar field and the other is this system. And the second is for the installation of a public utility in the ARE6 zone, as battery energy storage systems are classified as a public utility. We previously, at our first hearing, presented the testimony of our professional engineer and planner, Chris Nusser. And Mr. Nusser will be testifying tonight together with an electrical engineer, David Carney, who's an expert in the installation and operation of equipment of this type. We have changed 3 things, or actually changed 2 things, and then presented some additional information as a result of the last meeting. At the last meeting, the board and your planner expressed a desire that the access road to this facility be relocated outside of the 50-foot side yard setback requirement, setback area. That has been done. Access to the facility will now be made through the solar field. Mr. Nusser will testify to that, and Mr. Nusser submitted revised plans on December 9th. The second change is that the project footprint has changed a little bit. Mr. Cunliffe expressed a concern at the last meeting and in his review letter back in July that soil logs might indicate that the footprint needed to change to ensure that there was the required minimum separation distance between the subsurface stormwater storage system and the seasonal high groundwater table. That work has been done, and as a result of that, the plan has changed a little bit, and Mr. Nusser will testify to that. And then finally, Mr. Cunliffe pointed out that it might be helpful to provide the board with an operational statement, since this kind of equipment is unfamiliar to a lot of people. So we submitted an operational statement. It's Exhibit A18. So with that background, what I'd like to do is have Mr. Nusser testify at this time. Mr. Tripoli, do you want to swear him in again, or is he sworn?
He's previously sworn. Mr. Nusser, again, you are previously sworn. And will he be testifying as a planner also tonight?
He will.
Okay. Ms. Beam, I believe that you raised a concern before. At least I have it in my notes.
I just feel based on the scope of the actual project, that I think it should be fine. That was my, typically we require testimony, and I think I talked about this last time, from an AICP, but given the scope of the project, I don't take exception to Mr. Nusser testifying.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Yaska, so that's fine. So again, Mr. Nusser, previously sworn, you may continue, sir.
Thank you. Everybody can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm sure I didn't run into the same issue. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and sharing the revised plans. Do you want these plans marked in any way or noted that they're marked?
They've been pre-marked, Chris. Let me.
Oh,
What are
this is the December 9 revised site plans.
They're marked as A23, the full set.
Okay.
They're previously marked.
Okay.
So just if, Chris, when you're testifying, if you could identify which sheet it is that you're referring to.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to start from an overall perspective. So this is sheet 3, again, of A23. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. For everyone's perspective, it looks very similar. The facility is located in the same spot. at the rear of the solar facility. It has been since September, so I figured we can all just take a look at the overall here. Again, to refresh our memories. So we have Lakewood Farmingdale Road on the north of the site, the existing solar facility taking up the majority front of this property, which is about 74 acres, and then the battery system located at the south end in the rear of the property. Going to sheet 4, you can see the adjustments that we've made to the plan. The first is we've eliminated the access drive that came off of the existing dirt drive, which goes to the rear of the property. And we have replaced that with a gate directly accessing from the solar facility into the fenced area of the proposed facility. We have a secondary gate located on the east end on this corner here, on the other side of the electrical equipment within the solar facility, which comes out into basically the open field area here above the existing electric line. And then there's another gate back into the facility there. The primary entrance being directly from the solar facility into the proposed facility. The area surrounding the switchgear here in the rear of the site is overgrown gravel. It is gravel, but the grass has taken hold a little bit of it. And there's a gravel access road all the way there. So providing a gravel access path directly to the facility all the way through and is stabilized. As Mr. Yashkin also noted, we revised the stormwater management for the facility. This is now sheet 5, where previously we were providing for the underground infiltration basin on the southern end of the facility. It had been just in this area here. It had been a deeper section of stone in a limited portion of the facility based on the soil results that we performed. The facility is now basically all of the gravel area within the fence, and it is shallower. So instead of having one larger deep area, this is a more spread out, shallower stone profile, meeting the same requirements of the state.
Charlie, real quick, Charlie, do you have issues with that?
So the only comments that I have, Mr. Chair, is they are pretty close to the 2-foot separation from seasonal high water table. Their stone infiltration does have a sand layer underneath, which is to let the water obviously infiltrate into the groundwater below. And then also they actually have no flows for the 2 10-year storm. The 100-year storm, in the routing, there is a discharge, and it's a little bit over what the existing condition is. Chris, can you talk to the status of where you are with your outside agency permits with DEP?
Yeah, absolutely. So the DEP, that application is still pending. They require all of the same information that the board did here as far as the revised stormwater management. That's what had been kind of keeping the application from moving forward. So as we finished this and submitted this on the 9th, it also was ready to be submitted to the state. So that is still ongoing. But again, every discussion that we've had to date with the state has been that the proposed methodology that we are approaching our stormwater management with is acceptable to them.
So what I'll say, Mr. Chair, is I think it's very close, and there's a little bit of deviations that I think need to be something that are reviewed and approved by DEP also from stormwater management perspective. I would feel comfortable if the board were to consider this for use in preliminary, and then if the applicant were to come back for final, once they get those permits in hand, that would make me feel a little bit more comfortable with it. I mean, it's a site secluded all the way in the back of a solar field. There's some water bodies and channels that this drains to, but there's not a whole lot of adjacent residential development, so it's close. It's just, I think DEP also needs to sign off on it. And then Chris, internal to the solar field for access, so around that building in the back there, that's already, you said gravel, that's, some of it has been revegetated with just natural grass growth. Is there plans to clean that up, clean that access up, or what's the goal there?
I don't know that there was necessarily a plan to do that, to remove the grass that's in there stabilizing in the gravel. I mean, it is a stable footprint. If if it's your opinion that it should be cleaned up, that the lawn's removed from within there, whatever grass has grown, then we can certainly do that.
So what I would say, Mr. Chair, is as a condition of approval, if the applicant's engineer would agree to a meeting with myself and the fire bureau, the fire chief out there, and just look at the condition of it, if it needs to be supplemented in any way, that can be a condition of any board approval, just to make sure he's satisfied from the fire access. And Chris, you guys will testify on the internal fire suppression and detection systems for the actual BES units themselves too.
Yes, and that'll be Mr. Carney when he comes up. He'll talk about the operations and the pieces of the fire suppression that's built in and the other operational concerns. And yes, I think that's a perfectly acceptable condition to meet out there with the fire chief and make sure everybody's happy with access.
So what I would just say, Mr. Chair, the development is within the 300-foot riparian buffer, so DEP is going to be looking at this pretty scrupulously too. Even if the board grants approval, if DEP, for whatever reason, doesn't grant a permit, the applicant could potentially have to come back to this board, for amending their plan for a different location, not impacting those environmentally critical areas. So, we also have that, as a condition of the approval. That's all I have for right now, Mr. Chair.
That really summarizes the changes that we've made on a high level. There were some, minor notation things and other items that we took care of addressing in Mr. Cunliffe's prior letters, July 15 letter. So I don't know how the board wants to proceed. If you want to move into questions, if you want us to go through the review letters, you want me to move into planning testimony.
Can we get rid of the drawing here and get back to the board?
Yep.
Because that way I can see who's talking. Real quick, Mr. Nesser, are you doing your engineering at this moment? And,
yes.
Okay, I got a question for you. Monmouth County Planning Board, are you aware of their letter?
I don't know that I've seen a copy of their letter.
I would just, okay, because they had some concerns.
What's the date of that letter, Mr. Chair?
The date of that letter is 3/11/2020.
If I have it.
I think that there's 3 dates on there. 4/20/2020 and 4/27/2020. Following action was taken by Development Review Committee.
I'm looking through my file and I don't have a copy of that letter. Does anybody, who is it addressed to?
This information, the
Township.
Township Planning Board.
It went to E and LP. It went to Vessi 24 LLP. It came to us. It was sent to the Mr. Yoskin. It was sent to you
Oh,
with the exhibits
ahead.
way back when you were first scheduled. It's from April 27th.
Eileen, isn't it also part of the documents that you have online for this?
Yes.
Yes.
If you go to
Exhibit
the,
B3, right?
Actually, I just found it. I just found
yeah,
it.
Yeah, it was sent on July 24th, 20 with the scheduling letter.
yeah, B3, correct.
let me make a suggestion. This is a long, a lot of comments here.
Yeah,
Chris, you don't have a copy of it?
I am looking for it and I can't find it in my file.
Well, let me make a suggestion, Mr. Chair. I know you have another application tonight. If we can, I'm willing to read these items out to Mr. Nusser and see, to get his testimony on them. But maybe what we should do first is, Mr. Cunliffe, have you seen the letter and do you have any comments on it?
I have looked at it, Mr. Chair. What I will say is a lot of it has to do with Lakewood Farmingdale Road being a county road, you know, curbing improvements, ADA improvements across the site driveway. In my eyes, a lot of that was things that were probably brought up or should have been brought up for the solar panel application prior for this site. Having said that, it's still Monmouth County Planning Board. It is their road. It is the entire site that we're looking at. So I think, you know, as a condition of any approval, they got to get all outside agency approvals and satisfy Monmouth County Planning Board. You know, it's up to you. You know, obviously,
Chris,
I don't, you know.
Chris, what's your email address? I can email the letter to you right now.
It's just Chris, CHRIS,
Yeah,
at
yep.
ELP-INC.com.
Okay,
mean,
I'll send it over.
But let me pick up on Mr. Cunliffe's suggestion, because he's right about the nature of the comments. I mean, for example, one of the comments is, was an easement for the county culvert maintenance and reconstruction established for a particular county culvert. This project in no way affects that culvert. If it were going to be impacted, it would have been impacted by the solar field. If Mr. Chair, if you make compliance with this letter a condition of approval, obvious, I mean, County Planning Board a condition of approval, but it all seems to comment on things that are beyond our control. I mean, there's a comment on a low spot on Route 547.
I understand all of that, but see, it's listing your project.
No, I
in
understand
their
that.
Review letter, so we're gonna have to address it one way or the other. Is that right?
Well, when Chris has, yes, when Chris has had a chance to look at it,
Okay,
the question I would ask him is, will he be in a position to address all of the concerns that are listed in this letter?
okay. Mr.
In
Tropoli,
All right, Chris, I just sent it over, so.
how do you suggest we move forward? Is there any other, the Fire Bureau, the Monmouth County Health, the Environmental Commission?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the Environmental Commission, they had questions regarding, you know, spills and containment for the BS system. And then also they noted that it is within the 300-foot riparian buffer. And as I noted, they are required to get all outside agency and NJDEP approvals for it. So, you know, as any condition of any approval by this board, they got to get all required permits. So if they can't obtain those, then they got to come back to the board for, you know, a different site plan in a different location.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, as far as the 427 letter,
yes,
I think we should give Mr. Nusser an opportunity to review it. I mean, look, it's not unusual for this board to have Monmouth County Planning Board approval as a condition of any resolution approval. However, you know, I would defer to Charlie with regard to the engineering aspects, but if some testimony could be placed on the record by Mr. Nusser, perhaps the board would have a comfort level with including this as a condition of approval. But there are a number of conditions here, and again, I will defer to the board's professionals, but I mean, it's something we've done before. I mean, obviously, if they cannot get county board approval, then they'll be back here or for the county.
Yeah, I've had a
To
chance.
add on to Mr. Tropley's comments, like I said, I'm surprised a lot of these comments didn't come up for the original application for the solar facility. You know, a lot of them are, you know, with the driveways, can it support a fire apparatus and things of that nature, curbing along the frontage. You know, I'm surprised that didn't already come up. I think obviously it's a county road, it's their jurisdiction as far as the right of way and the improvements that they want to require along there. I'll let Chris take a look at the letter, but I think it's stuff that can be handled as a, condition of any approval.
It
Let me-
does say right in the cover letter that a response to comments 4, 5, and 6 are not required as right-of-way widening dedication was previously recorded. So 4, 5, and 6 are taken care of already.
Let me make a suggestion as to process. Chris also has to offer planning testimony. So what we could do is, it's not fair to ask him to.
I reviewed it already. I'm good.
Oh, okay,
We've been-
wow.
It's a lot of, it's a bit of repetitive comments. I agree with Charlie's assessment of it. I don't think it's anything we can't address. And quite frankly, I think, yeah, a number of them, well, I guess from the cover letter, a number of those have already been addressed as part of the prior. So it just seems to be some clarifications with the county, and it doesn't seem anything to be terribly concerning. So
I just wanted to bring it to the attention and just to make sure, because, it's a pretty substantial document. So I just want to make sure, that you're aware of it, and that, they're going to have to be satisfied regardless what this board, if we approve it, it's going to be an outside agency that's going to have to be satisfied.
understood. And I do appreciate you bringing it to my attention because I did not have it in my file and now I do. So thank you.
Right. The other one is the Monmouth County Board of Health. There's no occupied buildings. They agreed to that. All department environmental protection, DEP, wetland approvals, permits must be obtained. And proposed location of lithium-ion battery stations within a 300-foot riparian zone. That was one of their comments. Then we covered our environmental commission. And we're still waiting for DEP approvals, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, that handles the outside agencies. Mr. Charlie, do you have any other on the outside agencies?
All I would say is, Chris, is I would, recommend you call Monmouth County before you go ahead and do anything, because they might be looking at that driveway as a new driveway and not something that's existing as far as like curb return, putting in curb returns and all that kind of stuff. So it might be stuff that was already previously covered.
That's kind of what it seems like. So I will be doing that. Thank you.
Jennifer, do you have any other on this subject?
No, sir.
Okay. Board members. Mr. Roscoe. Mr. Hughes.
No, I'm good. I'm good, sir.
Mr. Saya.
Yeah. For the time being, Chairman Nansen, I will have questions later. My familiarity with Premium Power, AKA now Bionics, it's there. So I want to, see the parallels between the two, so I have a better understanding of what's being put in place here. Over.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell?
I just want to clarify, when this comes to a vote, are we just voting on the use variance and the preliminary, and then they'll have to come back to the final? Is that my understanding?
No, we're voting on everything at once, but it's based on outside
Based on
agents.
all the conditions from the outside parties.
Well, Mr. Cunliffe recommended that you only grant preliminary at this point until the DEP approval is
Okay.
issued, because it's so fundamental. We don't object to that.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Mr. O'Donnell? It's just preliminary.
Just the preliminary.
Yes.
Okay. I understand that.
Mr. Moretti?
No questions at this time.
Okay. Mr. Martin?
I'm good at this time too.
Mr. Gonzalez?
No comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, I think we got everybody.
Mr. Cantor,
Mr. I don't see Mr. Cantor. Oh, there he is. Hey, Glenn, you're right beside me. I'm sorry.
Right beside you. No questions, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Sorry I missed you there. Didn't notice the city behind you.
Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. Okay, Mr. Yuskin, you wanna?
Yeah, what I'd like, at this point, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move on to Mr. Nusser's planning testimony, take off his PE hat, put on his PP hat, and discuss compliance with the positive and negative criteria found in section 70 of the municipal land use law for D variances.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So the proposed project, again, is a battery energy storage system located on the 74-acre property in your ARE6 zone. This zone does permit the solar facility that exists on the property today. We need use variances for both this being a second principal use on the property as well as the use itself. The area that this is proposed in is located at the rear of the property and is very well hidden from any adjoining residential use or really any use at all. To the east and to the south, you have riparian buffers, wetlands, floodplains that extend a protected wooded area several hundred feet that cannot be developed. Similarly to the north and to the west, you have the solar facility in its existing state that's there blocking the current view. Just as this site was particularly suitable for the solar facility that is now sited on it, this proposed use is as well. The location of the transmission lines to the rear of the property, providing access to the electric grid, which is necessary for the system to operate correctly. The co-location of it with a very similar utility use of the solar facility. And it's, again, very tucked away location in the back of this property makes this an ideal location for the proposed use. The use is very limited impact in its overall footprint, less than 14,000 square feet in total on the 74-acre property. The uses, again, are both complementary and they're both low intensity uses. There's not constant manning of these facilities. The operational statement, which was provided to the board and Mr. Carney will expand on, will tell you that the site is remotely monitored and maintenance crews do come to the site. However, infrequently. So there's no negative impacts from this from a traffic standpoint, and again, is a very low intensity use. So having this particularly suited site for this use, the use itself advances several purposes of zoning, specifically purpose A. This enhances the general welfare by improving the stability of the electric grid. This is a benefit that is felt by everyone that lives along and is served by this electric line. The community in general benefits from having a more stable electric system. This also advances purpose I, a desirable visual environment, simply because we have a use that again is providing a public benefit, and it's in a location by its nature that's hidden and protected from the public's view. From a negative impact statement, the use again has no visual impacts. It will have no noise impacts on any neighboring property. There is no dust, and quite frankly, is probably about the best neighbor that you can ask for. You won't know it's there. It'll just be there doing its job. And quite frankly, the best compliment you'll be able to give it is that, again, you don't know what's there, and it's just moderating and stabilizing the electric grid. There's no negative impacts to zone plan or master plan. The utility electric use is already permitted on this property. It's simply an extension of a very similar use. So in total, bit of a quick bit of testimony, I suppose. This use is an excellent use for the proposed location because of the site that we're on, because of the benefits it provides to the community, and the lack of negative impacts that are associated with it.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, that's the testimony of Mr. Nusser.
Jennifer,
So generally, I agree with the testimony that's been provided. I think the site is particularly suited, given the fact that there's a solar array there, and this is a similar utility. I do think that it promotes the general welfare. I don't know about desirable visual environment, because you're not really doing anything to make it pretty. You're just putting it in the back of the site. But you don't need to address any other positive goal of zoning other than purpose A. So I think that prong of the statute has been met as well. And I do agree that they're, based on the testimony that's been provided, and with Charlie being on top of the stormwater management and the DEP issues, that, I don't think that this creates any negative impact. So I would agree that the application as it stands meets the statutory criteria for a variance. And I also would like to add that they moved their improvements out of the buffer, which is the direction that we had given them at the last meeting. So there's no impact associated with this application with that 50-foot perimeter buffer.
Mr. Chair, just one last clarification question for Chris, and I think it's in his response letter too. But the proposed improvements, it's in a cleared area. There's just going to be minor brush or scrub removal there, no tree removal.
Correct. Yeah, there's no, and actually, as part of the DEP application, because we are in that 300-foot buffer, and we are asking for a hardship exemption along with that. You're correct. No tree removal. It's all volunteer growth, scrub shrub that's come in there. Part of what is going to be proposed is a mitigation plan that will actually enhance that buffer zone by putting some more native plantings in where you have some non-native and invasive plantings now.
Okay. So what I would just say,
Charlie, real quick, let me remind the board. I know Mr. Nasser had stated hardship. This is not a hardship case to the board. They filed a hardship case to the DEP.
Correct.
It had nothing to do with this application as far as to the board. Just a clarification. Okay, Charlie, sorry.
So what I would just say, I think they are asking for a waiver for the Woodlands management plan, which I have no issue with, since you're not taking out any trees. Obviously, I would just say I would request, you provide as a condition of approval a landscaping plan with the final site plan application, just in accordance with any requirements that DEP makes you do for their mitigation. Do you have any issue with that?
No, not at all.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask?
Yeah.
I noticed that Shari's not here this evening, but did you receive her letter, Shari Spiro? She's the certified tree expert. And there are some comments in her letter that I think probably should be addressed.
Yeah, do we want to go through that now?
I mean,
Yeah,
you don't have to
why
go through
don't we?
my letter line by line, because I would have brought up issues if I had any, and I don't need to speak for Charlie, but generally when he has things that are not addressed in his letter, he brings them up as well, so as not to go through those letters unnecessarily. The only issue that she had requested tree fencing be installed to ensure that construction are not, could not potentially damage existing trees that are to remain. Is that something you're willing to do?
Yes.
And then the other thing, and I don't know, you let me know how you want to respond to this, because I know it was probably part of the solar application, but she said that 12 trees have died along the frontage, and they should be replaced. So I don't know if that's you. I don't know if that's the solar. I don't know. But
Yeah,
she
so
said
I mean,
that-
we discussed this earlier, and the applicant's going to reach out, because he's going to be, obviously still interacting with the property owner who operates the solar facility. So he's going to talk with them and work it out with them to get them to.
just make sure you coordinate with Shari, whatever you guys decide.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
do you have any questions?
My questions pertain to the actual operation of
Okay.
the batteries.
Okay. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Mr. Roscoe,
No.
Mr. Hughes,
I'm good so far, sir.
Mr. O'Donnell,
I'm good, sir.
Mr. Moretti,
I'm good.
Mr. Mertens,
I'm good too.
Mr. Gonzalez,
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Saya.
Yes, so Chris, you did say that maintenance is performed and it's performed regularly. Do you have a specific thought in mind when you have 3 batteries, 3 stations basically, that are being maintained? How often are people coming and going at that site?
I don't want to not answer your question, but I will say that Mr. Carney, when he comes up, he will be answering that. That's part of his testimony. I don't want to steal his thunder.
Got it.
And Chris, I'll just ask it to you because it's going to come up with operations, but in the operational statement, there was an indication that the typical service life is 15 years, and every 7 years, there's a more extensive maintenance than just your, monthly or whatever it is, checkup during the year. And that there's a possible need to add additional batteries or an inverter kind of setup on the site. Is your site plan already inclusive of those improvements for year 7?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Mr. Tropoli, do we want to go ahead and get all the testimony on the record and then open to public?
I would agree to do that, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Yaskin, you have 2 more witnesses?
Just one, Mr. Tropoli, David Carney.
Okay, and this is on operations, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think at this point in time, we should have all the witnesses' testimony on the record, and then you can open it up.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Yaskin?
Mr. Tropoli, do you want to swear Mr. Carney?
Yes, I agree. He hasn't been sworn. Mr. Carney, raise your right hand, please. Swear the testimony you give this evening be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Yes, and state your name for the record, sir.
My name is David Carney. I'm located at 1801 Market Street in Philadelphia.
Okay, very well. Your witness, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Carney, by whom are you employed?
So that would be Vessi 24, also known as Veridity Energy or ORMAT.
And what are your job responsibilities?
I'm currently a project manager, but in my previous role, I was an electrical engineer, installing and commissioning battery energy storage systems, as well as designing them and going and programming them.
Would you give the board the benefit of your educational background?
Sure, I have a bachelor's of science in electrical engineering, as well as nuclear engineering. I'm also a licensed professional engineer in New Jersey, as well as several other states.
And have you testified before this or any other planning board before?
I have testified before a different planning board.
And that was in connection with a battery energy storage system?
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer Mr. Carney as an expert in electrical engineering with particular expertise in the construction and operation of battery energy storage systems.
I might have missed it, but what was your college that you went to? Where'd you
I
get
went
your-
to Drexel University and studied electrical and nuclear engineering.
Okay, thank you. We accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Carney, were you involved in the preparation of the operational statement that's been provided to the zoning board for this matter?
Yes, sir.
And do you have a copy with you tonight?
I do.
Good. What I'd like you to do is to summarize for the benefit of the board, the operational statement. I guess that what you're going to be doing is explaining what a BESS is, how it works, what it's used for, how it's maintained. We know that we've heard at least two members of the board have said that they have particular interest in this aspect of the application.
Right. So BESS, BESS stands for Battery Energy Storage System. And our company is interested in installing these and connecting them to the grid to help stabilize the grid for several purposes. One of which is frequency regulation. So it's very important that our grid maintains 60 hertz. If it's offset even slightly, it can cause severe damage to a lot of electrical infrastructure. Additionally, not many people are aware of the fact that the energy used on the grid must equal exactly the energy being produced on the grid. So any excess power produced on the grid is immediately burned up in one way or another. So the battery energy storage allows us to stabilize the grid in this fashion due to the fact that there's been a substantial amount of renewable energy in the form of solar systems. We've been unable to capture a lot of that energy generation as it's typically overproducing when it's sunny and you can't predict when there's going to be cloud cover. So in conjunction with solar energy, battery energy storage just makes sense, which is why we decided to locate it directly next to this solar plant to help stabilize the grid in this area. And I'd like to point out that we have several other battery energy storage systems in New Jersey on grids that are highly unstable. They have a lot of issues, and it causes taxpayers money to pay for these utilities and ISOs to upkeep the public infrastructure. So I prepared 8 points that I'll just go through here. The first of which, Paul, you had asked about the frequency of service and how often someone would be on site. The answer is about once a month, and it would be 1 to 2 individuals. At most, it'll happen like twice a month, but this is an unmanned site, which means that we are remotely monitoring it and only going there when there's an issue. Typically, what we see for our current sites that we're operating, it's typically a small issue that only requires to send 1 technician to the site. And as Chris pointed out, it's very quiet. You're not going to have a ton of construction vehicles. It'll most likely be like myself going and plugging my laptop into the controller to adjust a thing or two.
Dave, when that service happens, we're talking about like a little contractor's utility van kind of vehicle, or are we talking about like a big utility truck or what? Yeah,
Not usually a big utility truck. In fact, there's rarely a need for a bucket truck. It's usually just a sedan rolling into the site, whether it's an electrician or myself or some other sort of technician.
And then just one other quick thing. So the system itself, it's not directly connected to the solar field, right? Like the solar grid, the solar field pumps it into the grid, and then this battery charging system draws energy from the grid. They're not linked to each other, correct?
Right. Well, I mean, everything on the grid is technically connected, and especially with them being right next to each other, But no, they're not directly connected.
So there could be a point in the future if this solar field ever gets decommissioned that if you got it, should Vessi decide to keep this on there, this could be operating on the site by itself at some point.
Oh, certainly. We have battery energy storage operating on its own across the country.
Okay, thanks.
Not a problem. So I believe there was another question regarding from you, Charles. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Mr. Cantor.
My question, maybe as a resident of Howell, have these ever caught fire anywhere in the recent past? Is there a potential for catching fire?
Right. So none of our systems have caught fire, and I'm not familiar with any large scale battery energy storage systems that have caught fire. However, obviously, you know about, you heard about the Samsung phones blowing up on the airplane. That's what's caused a lot of the negative attention surrounding lithium-ion batteries. However, there is no chance of these batteries exploding, as well as no chance of them catching fire in the way they are configured. Now, getting to the fire protection and such, that is a point I intend on covering. I believe it's about the 6th point down on my list here, but I did want to just kind of go through them in order, if you don't mind.
Go
ahead. Yep.
I just had a question too, as far as the electric. Now, the feed, the way these batteries, correct me if I'm wrong, the way they get charged is the overflow from the feed into the grid, correct? If there's overflow, it comes back into these batteries and holds a charge?
No, that's not necessarily how that works. Okay. So we are given a signal from the utility, and that signal tells us to charge or discharge. The way we are making a profit off of this is by participating in programs that the utility offers, in which they tell us when to charge and discharge, i.e. we're just offering this service to them to help stabilize the grid. They're the ones monitoring the grid and know where the frequency is and if they need power or they need us to charge. So essentially, we're just following that signal 24/7.
Okay, now how is that signal monitored?
So it's delivered to our server from their server, and we deliver it to our site.
Okay.
So Dave, these batteries then are basically used for peak shaving at high times, correct?
Yeah, peak shaving is a term you could use, yep.
You know, they're registered with the FERC?
Are the batteries registered with FERC?
Yeah, well, you have to enroll in the program in order to go ahead and, you know, participate with peak shaving and load sharing and surging and all that other good stuff.
Right. So we register with the ISO as well as with the utility. There are instances where you would have to register with the FERC. However, that's for programs that we're currently not participating in.
Okay. All right.
So I believe that there was a question about the project lifespan. Essentially, our project is projected to last 15 to 20 years within what we call an augmentation, somewhere between the halfway mark of that. It's not yet determined how fast those batteries will degrade. However, we do intend on replacing some of the batteries as their state of health, is what it's called, degrades below a certain point.
Now, are they recyclable?
There are guidelines on recycling lithium-ion batteries in which we participate in per the guidelines that are imposed on us, as well as the battery manufacturers.
Okay, so if they're not recyclable, what happens to the batteries after they're spent?
They are recycled.
Oh, they are. Oh, okay.
Yes. Yep, it's mandated to recycle lithium-ion batteries so they don't impose any detriment to the environment. So
It's not like PCBs or anything, correct?
Oh, there's definitely nasty stuff in lithium-ion. I'm not going to skirt that. However, it is environmentally, it's taken care of in the right way, so it does not affect the environment.
Okay.
Dave, there are security requirements as well with regards to, you know, the access to where you store what tools and other things in order to perform the maintenance. All of that's taken into account. It's heavily locked down and so forth.
So security includes, well, first of all of our asset are behind padlock. And then it's surrounded by a gate, which is also locked. I believe I'm not sure how tall the gate is, but it's sufficiently high. And we have security cameras with a network operations center, like I said, that's monitoring those cameras 24/7. Additionally, everything's, you know, locked. There's no tools on site. The technicians bring what they need as needed to the site. So there's no security concerns in that manner.
Dave, I'm guessing that you have this on your list to talk about, but you just used the phrase padlocked assets. Members are probably wondering what's in those cabinets and how they're secured. So if you could talk about that.
Well, sure. So we have the actual battery enclosures, which house the lithium-ion batteries. And so they're basically just an enclosure surrounding the batteries with doors to access them, to slide them in and out of a rack. And behind every door has its own padlock. Connected to that battery enclosure is the inverter, which converts the DC energy from the batteries to AC to connect to the grid. Connected, and that inverter has a control panel which is behind a lock and key. And then connected to that inverter is a transformer which steps the voltage up from the 480 to the interconnection voltage. So each of the three units, it has those three components: the enclosure, the inverter, the transformer. And then all of those are connected to a switchgear. And the switchgear has compartments which are also locked. And the switchgear contains a breaker, as well as some safety relays and the meters. And that is ultimately what is connected to the utility pole where we connect to the grid.
Have you experienced thefts at any of the other facilities you operate?
No, there's literally nothing to steal, and you'd really have to, like, you'd have to cut through a lot of things and know what you're doing to get into there and cause any damage. But there's not anything to steal, really.
Real quick, Dave, are these cabinets self containment? Will they contain whatever's in there? If there's a spill or anything, are they designed to contain within the cabinet?
Yeah, I saw that contamination risk was a question that many people had, and there's little to no potential for contamination, especially not from the batteries. But there's literally no risk of the batteries contaminating anything. There is oil in the transformers, but that is very low risk of contaminating anything as well. So there's
But the-
really no concern on that.
But
end.
the cabinets themselves, they would contain whatever liquid that's inside there. Is that the way they're designed?
So no, the enclosures contain racks, and the racks are what hold the battery cells. You slide them into the racks, and they're self-contained, and they do not leak. Okay, they're the most expensive thing on this site, right? We're paying millions of dollars for these battery cells. They do not leak. The enclosures are all self-contained. They wouldn't leak, but if they did, they would be inside the enclosure if that was a concern.
Well, what the transformer, that's inside that enclosure, correct?
Yeah, the transformer's a separate enclosure.
Okay. Now that enclosure, would it contain any oil if
Yes.
it's built within it?
Yes.
That is a containment design. Okay.
Yep.
That's where I was going. Okay.
So I wanted to cover the fire protection and suppression measures. So essentially, we comply with all of the NFPA 855 safety regulations, as well as all our system is UL certified. So it's adhering to all of the local and national codes and standards for fire safety regulation. There's multiple means of having fire suppression for a system. You can have a dry agent, you can have a sprinkler system, but at the end of the day, all major battery manufacturers and anyone, all fire departments that are privy to battery storage know that you simply, if there ever was a fire, and it's a very low likelihood of a fire ever occurring, you would simply just let it burn up. You would just let it burn up. You don't, there's no need to attempt to extinguish it, or it's all self-contained inside the enclosures. You know, you can go online and look at Tesla purposely setting off burning some of their mega pack enclosures, and it just turns into a pyre, a very small pyre for a short period of time, and you stand back and just watch it go. And essentially that's what we advise all fire departments to do in the event of a fire. And during my last testimony in front of a board, I told them that I have offered to give fire departments training on containing a best fire, if that's something that the board would find useful.
I think the board would.
That is not a problem, and just want to reiterate, we have people watching our battery systems 24/7 remotely. So, and never had a fire. I'm not aware of any large scale battery energy storage fires in recent history. The next topic, unless someone had questions regarding
Anybody
fire
have-
protection.
Mr. Cantor,
No.
Very good.
Mr. Roscoe, Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, I don't know if this even relates to this, but I follow kind of the timeline like you were talking about with the Samsung phones and all that. I'm an RVer, and a lot of people use battle-borne batteries in their RV to generate with their inverters and stuff. And I know the big game changer with these types of things were the battery monitoring systems. And I assume that this type of setup has that type of circuitry in it that does make it considerably safer than what we have heard of in the past.
We have literally hundreds of thousands of points that we are monitoring 24/7. Temperature, air pressure, you name it, we're measuring it.
Okay, so that's basically the difference here. The battery monitoring systems are what really kind of brings the safety to these. Like I said, I know that it brings it in a smaller package for like RVs, and like you mentioned, cars and things like that. Okay, that's all I wanted to know, because if that's the case, then things are looking good there. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Martin?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. O'Donnell?
I'm good up till now, I am.
Okay. Mr.
Dave, just-
Gonzalez?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Moretti?
I'm good.
Mr. Saya?
Dave, not knowing if you're going to touch on this, so I'll ask it now.
Sure.
You know, the batteries, there's 3 each. They're all fully charged. We lose electrical power. What's the kilowatt/megawatt of each battery, and for how long will they operate?
Right. So who loses power? Is the grid down?
Yes.
Like let's say there's a blackout.
Yes.
So no one will be receiving power. That's not the purpose of these batteries. And also they'll never be 100% charge. Just so you know, they have stated charge limits where they'll go. It's typically like they never go below 10%. They never go above 90%. So in the event of a blackout, they would just simply stay charged because per the grid requirements, you cannot discharge in the event of a blackout. They do not want that. Let's say there's someone working on the lines. You don't want them to potentially be working on an energized line. So we have safety relays in place which automatically trip our system offline if it senses that the grid voltage is wrong. So
very good. Thank you.
Dave, to add on to Mr. Say's comment with the blackout, so all the monitoring systems and everything like that, do they stay powered by the battery systems themselves? Is there a generator, or do you lose any communications when that blackout occurs?
we do not. So they are powered by the batteries themselves. We also have a UPS. Additionally, we have cellular modems. So if we lose internet, we still have communications and security footage.
Thanks.
Jennifer?
No, sir, I don't have any comments about the operational testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Mr. Yeskin?
Mr. Chair, that concludes our presentation and our testimony.
Okay. At this time, I will take, if there's no other questions or comments from the board, I'll take a motion to open to public.
I'll make a motion to open the public, Mr. Chair.
I'll second it.
Who seconded it? Mr. Moretti?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Hughes, seconded by Mr. Moretti. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, at this time, I think we can take questions and comments at the same time here, Eileen. So
Okay.
at this time, we'll open to public.
Okay, for any members of the public that are watching or listening to the hearing, the chairman has just opened the hearing up for members of the public to ask questions or comments on this application. If you wish to be brought into the meeting to ask any questions or comment, please use the raise your hand feature. You will need audio and video. You will need to give your name and address and be sworn in. So with that, please raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. And I'm not seeing anyone.
Give them a few seconds. Anybody?
No one yet. Again, if any member of the public wishes to ask questions or comment, please raise your hand.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anyone.
I think given ample time, can I have a motion to close public portion?
Make a motion.
Motion to close.
Second.
Who made the motion?
Mr. O'Donnell.
Mr. O'Donnell and seconded by Mr. Roscoe. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask Mr. Carney just one last question? Just,
Yes, sir.
so we talked about the service life of the system, anywhere from 15 to 20 years. At the end of that 20 years, you guys obviously figure out whether or not you want to revamp everything and keep the use going on the site. In the event that Vessi does not want to, or, say Vessi goes out of business or something like that, what happens to the system on the site?
Right, so it would be decommissioned appropriately. We have budgeted the system for its entire lifetime, including the disposal of the batteries, which is a requirement to, like I said, to recycle them. So the whole site will be decommissioned and presumably restored to its original condition. I'm not sure about the geological work, the rocks and the backfill and that. However, the equipment will be removed from the site.
As a condition of any board approval, could you provide like a plan just detailing, approximate costs and what would be required, what need to be removed as far as from the component side of things?
I do have a decommissioning guide specification. That's an internal document. It's confidential. However, I could probably share some some paragraphs from it for you if that would be adequate.
I think that would be good. And then obviously, just in the resolution, should the use or Vessi goes out of business, or, the intention is to not carry on the use, the owner, or I guess it's a legal question for Ron, say the applicant goes out of business, but this stays on the site, then does the responsibility fall to the owner of the property as a whole to kind of decommission it, or how does that work?
Well, the owner at the time, I would think, is bound by whatever this board does. That's the question.
So the owner of the property then too, right?
Yeah, I would think.
Okay. So I would just say, Mr. Yaskin, as long as you have no objection to it, us including appropriate language in any resolution that the applicant and or owner shall bear all responsibility for decommissioning, should the use ever be abandoned. Is that acceptable?
I think it's a reasonable condition. I'd like to look at the resolution for the solar facility. I'm wondering if a condition was imposed like that on that facility, which is much, much larger.
Yeah, typically they have it's a requirement in ordinance for them to provide a decommissioning plan for the entire facility. So that's kind of why I asked it for this. I know this is a much smaller scale, but there are some concerns with the batteries and environmental and things like that. We just don't want something sitting there, for 5 years beyond the.
I understand it as does the company. So I don't think we have a problem with that condition.
Most of our cell tower ordinances has a decommission requirement to it. So
again, we don't object to that.
Okay, Charlie, you have any further questions?
That's it, Mr. Chair.
Jennifer, any further input?
No, sir.
Okay, how about board members? Do y'all have any further questions or comments? Mr. Saya?
No, I think all my questions have been answered. It's a hit and miss. This is last 15 years. This has been, the future of trying to provide energy security via stability on the grid, and this is just another, step forward in doing so. Over.
Okay, Mr. Moretti?
No questions.
Mr. Mertens?
All my questions been answered, and I've been satisfied with the testimony up to now. Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez?
No questions, no comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. O'Donnell?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with everything.
Mr. Hughes?
Nope, I think I'm good to go, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Orozco?
So far, so good.
Mr. Cantor?
No questions.
Okay, Jennifer, I just have one question to you.
Yeah.
Would this be classified as an inherently beneficial use?
I mean, I don't know if there's been, I mean, Mr. Yoskin would know this probably better than I would, but I don't know if there's any case law that specifically goes to this use that says it's inherently beneficial, but I would submit that safe and reliable power is inherently beneficial. But they meet the prongs of the statutory requirement even without that inherently beneficial tag on it. You know, the testimony that Mr. Nusser provided, you know, went through the particular suitability, the positive criteria and the negative criteria. If it was inherently beneficial, the positive prong would have been met and they would still have to go through the negative, which we determined were negligible. So, you know, I think that they can meet the burden either way. And I think it's more conservative to do it the way that they've done it in case anybody, you know, comes back and says, no, this wasn't inherently beneficial. Go through the proofs, and they've gone through the proofs and in my opinion have satisfied them.
I just wanted to throw that out there, but
Jennifer's correct, Mr. Chair, that there is no case that has deemed it to be inherently beneficial, nor has a statute, any New Jersey statute, been enacted that would make it beneficial. So we chose the more comprehensive approach.
okay, that answers my question. Okay, Mr. Yuskin, would you like to do a summation?
Well, it's easy when the application is a compact one. Again, this is an application for, it was originally an application for preliminary and final site plan approval with 2 variances. We've offered testimony that the variances are supportable. We have agreed with Mr. Cunliffe's proposal that the application be approved, just the variances be approved, but only preliminary approval be granted until such time as DEP issues the hardship exception under the Flood Hazard Area Control Act, which, by the way, you mentioned you got nervous about that word hardship. It's a shame that that's what they call it. It's a misnomer. This facility is in the outer 150 feet of this 300-foot riparian zone, and it will be approved. So again, 14,000 square foot facility at the back of a 50-acre solar field on a 74-acre property. We think Howell Township is an ideal location for the use, where you have, as Mr. Carney explained, a somewhat unstable grid. So we hope that you agree and will approve the application.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any further from the board? If not,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
You know, there is one more question that comes to mind.
Yeah, okay.
So Mr. Carney.
Hey, I'm still here.
So if there was a mobile unit that had what we call satellite transmission or just pure HF, right, for safety and security, would they be able to plug into that battery in the event of a national disaster?
You would have to retrofit the system for that vehicle to plug into it.
So there's no ports readily available. That's the question, right?
Correct. Yeah, you have to alter the electrical infrastructure.
Very good. Thank you.
Is that something that could be easily done?
Oh yeah. In fact, we've given out ideas to have solar charging units at some of our battery facility sites. It's very easily done.
Would that be something maybe that y'all could look into doing? You know,
So it's a private property here, not really any ability to do it at this location, but you know, we have systems all over the country, and you know, one at a college was proposed, and we were going to put some EV charging stations there. in conjunction with some solar panels.
Okay. Okay. If there's no further from the board, what's the pleasure of the board? And this is for preliminary, no, preliminary only, variances and preliminary only.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve this application on a preliminary basis, and also that they have to come back for all the different things that we need from the county, the DEP, along with any other conditions. I think our professionals went over this very good. Our board went over it very good. Everyone seems to be satisfied with all the questions. So my motion is to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second
Mr.
that.
O'Donnell,
Mr.
Do I
Saya
have a
will
second?
second it.
Mr. Say, second?
Yep.
Okay, have a motion by Mr. O'Donnell, seconded by Mr. Saya. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes, I would just like to add that I like the idea brought up about the decommissioning in the event of, and I do believe Mr. Carney said that they already have all that budgeted out. So I'd like to make sure that's in the condition of approval. And with that, I vote yes.
thank you. Mr. Mertens,
Based on all the findings of the facts, I'm going to vote yes.
thank you. Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Based on all testimony placed on the record, outside agency approvals, my vote is yes also.
Thank you. Motion carries. Application's approved.
Good luck, Mr. Yiskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members, and have a happy holiday, everybody.
Thank
You
you.
too. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay. At this time, the board's going to take a 10-minute break.
Okay, the board will now take a recess. They'll be back at about 8:51. The
Thank
zoning
you.
board will now reconvene.
Thank you, Eileen. Okay. Moving right along. Okay, next case on our agenda is case number BA 20115, Howell Associates LLC, use variance and amended preliminary and final site plan approval to convert office space to self-storage. Application of Howell Associates LLC is applicant and owner seeking a use variance to amend preliminary and final site plan approval for the conversion of the existing second-story office space, 27,500 square foot, to self-storage in 3 phases, and the construction of a 2-story entrance with elevator and stair access in the rear of the existing building, roughly 400 square foot, on premises known as Block 130, lots 41, 42, 43, 2301 US Highway 9. The application was originally scheduled for December 14th when it was carried to December 21st, 2020 with no further notice. Expiration date, February 23rd, 2021. Mr. Cohen.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Todd Cohen for the applicant, Howell Associates LLC. You pretty much stated what the application is about this evening. Just want to remind the board, this is in the existing Regal Plaza Shopping Center, which has been there for about 20 years. And we're simply converting the second floor of existing office to self-storage facility. There's an existing self-storage component on the site that's been there for quite some time. I have with me this evening 3 witnesses. We have Mike Antilli from Crest Engineering, who will handle the engineering testimony. I have Dan Governell from Barlow Governell and Associates, the architect, and Andrew Janu from Beacon Consulting will wrap up the planning testimony. I don't know if you want to swear in all 3 at the same time or one at a time.
Yes, sir. Let's go ahead and swear everybody in, but we've got to bring somebody else back up into the meeting.
Dan, are you here?
He's there. I just got to promote him. 1 second.
Okay. Dan, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
All
Okay.
right, all set. Will the witnesses please raise your right hands? I swear the testimony you'll give this evening be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
I do.
I do.
And Mike, starting with you, can you have your full name, please?
Michael B. Intile, Intile.
Thank you. Next, Andrew, please.
Andrew Janu, Janiw.
Thank you. And finally, Dan.
Dan Governelli, Governale.
Thank you. All sworn.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm going to do is first have Michael testify with regard to the engineering, and we'll address T&M's letter and the questions raised in that. Then we'll jump to the architect, and then we'll have Andy wrap up the planning testimony. With that being said, Michael, you've been sworn. Could you briefly put your qualifications, both educational and professional, on the record, please?
Yes, I'm a New Jersey professional engineer and professional planner since 1990. A principal with Crest Engineering Associates, located with offices in Toms River and Millstone. I've been preparing site plans and subdivisions for residential, commercial, industrial projects for approximately 25 years. And I've provided testimony in Howell Township and mostly boards throughout Middlesex, Monmouth, and Ocean counties.
Mr. Chairman, would you be qualified as a professional engineer, please?
Education background?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree from Fairleigh Dickinson University in civil engineering. And my background is, as I said, about 30 years of site development for residential, commercial, industrial sites, site plans, subdivisions, use variances, D variances, and C variances, and providing testimony for boards throughout Monmouth, Ocean, Middlesex County primarily.
You licensed in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, current license in the state of New Jersey.
We accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Michael, you're obviously familiar with the application, and you reviewed the October 7th letter from T&M that Charles presented. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you briefly describe for the board what the application exactly is this evening?
Yeah, I'll locate us. We're on Route 9 North in the HD1 zone. Property comprises about 20.22 acres. Property is currently developed, as you said, for a long time, currently with a mixed-use retail office and self-storage primary building. There's also a White Castle, a learning experience, and a Dollar General on the south side. Bordering the site, commercial to the north, south, and west across Route 9 also, and then residential directly to the east. Other site features include the stormwater management basin, which is fairly large in the back or the east part of the site. There's two entrances to the site that exist today. We'll call them the north and south side of the property, and ancillary parking throughout the site. The mixed-use building is currently 27,500 square feet. That is the building that we're modifying the second story to. The first floor is retail, 27,500, and second floor is currently office at 27,500 square feet. And it's the office portion, the second floor, that we'll be modifying to storage. The application does seek to convert this existing second floor office to self-storage in 3 phases, phase 1, 2, and 3. And the first phase will include conversion of 14,875 square feet from office to storage. Phase 2 will comprise 17,635 square feet, to give you a sense of where it's going with the phases. And the final phase will be the 100% of 27,500 square feet for the entire second floor. As a matter of practicality, to access the second floor storage, we're proposing construction of a 19 by 21 masonry structure. The structure will house the elevator and also stairs to access that second floor. And that, if we could put up, I guess, the first rendering.
It's A21, I believe, Eileen.
So what phase would that?
Give me a second.
For the,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman?
what phase would that elevator and that section be proposed? place?
That's constructed in phase 1 from the beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm. Is that the one you want?
Thank you. Yes. So there's 2 renderings. This is the larger scale rendering. There's another rendering that's blown up. So what you see is between, you see the 4, I'll call them the fingers or extensions off the back of the main building. They're currently self-storage. And the proposal is to provide that masonry building addition. As you can see in yellow there, but in the direct center of the building. Correct.
Right.
Yes. And how it will work is essentially the same way it's working today, where people who want to access their self-storage, there's a gate to the south side. At this location, everything is completely gated and secure. What someone would do would be check in with the business office if necessary. If not, punch in the key code. The keypad here allows them access into this fenced-in area and then access to their storage units in any of these prongs. Obviously, if you're going to the second story, then you're going to access right at this location. As far as the parking requirements, just to touch on those, office is 1 per 300 square feet, 1 space per 300. Self-storage is 1 space per 5,000 square feet. So the parking requirement is greatly reduced. Currently, with the office on the second floor, 92 spaces are required. At the end of phase 3, when the project's completed with the 27,500 square feet of storage, there'll be only 6 spaces required. A D2 variance is required for the expansion of a non-conforming use. You'll hear testimony from the planner tonight with regard to that. Self-storage is obviously not a permitted use, but it's been there for some time, and he'll address that. There are no other variances to the application. If we could, Eileen, switch to the second rendering, please.
It's 822.
Great, thank you. And so this is that little yellow area, of course, blown up. And what it comprises is the 19 by 21 masonry building. We placed some bollards on the outside just to protect the building itself. There's 2 pedestrian or man entrances, one on the north and one on the south side. The one on the south side is closer to the stairs, if you're going to use the stairs, I suppose, and then on the north side, the elevator. There is no change to the stormwater drainage patterns as a result of us saw cutting essentially the pavement in this location and installing the masonry building addition. You can see an inlet located right approximately 20 feet in front of the proposed structure, and the stormwater management will be unchanged. That leads to the basin on site I mentioned. Runoff from this area, as you can see with the flow arrows, will continue in the same direction into that inlet, so there's no effect of this structure on the stormwater management. In effect, we're replacing masonry building where pavement currently exists. So no increase in the impervious area whatsoever due to the construction of this building. And that's pretty much my testimony. Maybe go through the letters.
If there's no questions of the general testimony, we could turn to T&M's letter at this point.
Charlie.
Yeah,
We'll
Mr.
jump in here.
Yeah, so just a couple quick questions. So there's no other existing utilities or anything like that, Mike, that need to be relocated underneath the masonry building?
Yes, there are compressors located right where the building's going, Charles, and those are going to be relocated to the roof. There's a parapet on the top of this 27-foot masonry structure, and those will be located within that and shielded from view.
So all right, they'll provide some screening and show it on
Right.
architecture.
Is there any height
Correct.
requirement here, Charlie?
I believe it's 35 in the zone, so if they're at 27 and a half, that's 7.5 feet of play. I mean, everything's going to be less than 7.5 feet, Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the stormwater management system, there's no issues with that. It currently is free draining. There's no clogging issues or anything like that.
I reviewed the stormwater management system on a cursory level. It's been operating sufficiently for a long time. They have a maintenance crew that operates for the owner, this site and other sites, routinely checking on maintenance of the structure. There's no standing orders, nothing that I noticed with my eye that was unusual.
Okay, and then roof leaders obviously just can be directed at grade and everything overland flows in a parking area, no change to that.
Correct.
As far as ADA accessibility, so I see we got the elevator in the back here, but there's other means for ADA to get to the second floor, elevators?
Yes, currently there's an ADA accessible route on the front of the retail building. There's access to an elevator in that first floor. And the idea being that if you need handicap accessibility to the second floor, you would park in the handicap spaces that are currently there, access that elevator to the second story.
Okay, and then as far as access, once you get in there, once you get up to the second floor in the different phases, there'll be like a keypad or some kind of system preventing someone from just freely walking in.
Yes, there's going to be security on the first floor for the retail tenants so that they don't have free access, obviously, to the second floor. It'd only be for whoever has a code to get in.
Okay, and then as far as site parking, obviously said it's a significant reduction going from office to warehouse. Would you also say that in terms of trips from the site, that's also a significant reduction during the peak
Yes.
hour?
I would say that obviously the reduction in parking will equate to a reduction in trips.
So what I would say, Mr. Chair, obviously it's on Route 9. I take no issue with it. Maybe the applicant, as a condition of approval, get a letter of no interest. Really it's a significant reduction in the site trip. So, it's really whether or not DOT, wants to really comment on it, but I don't foresee it being an issue from this board's perspective. As far as loading,
Charlie,
there's
real
existing.
quick, Charlie,
Yeah.
are you requesting a no interest letter from DOT?
I honestly don't think that we really need it. Being that we're not going over, I think the threshold is 100 new trips during the peak hour. We're significantly reducing the parking demand, right, Mike, from 92 down to 6?
To 6, yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
so that's a
And we're not
significant.
changing the access points at all.
Yeah, so
Nothing
I
is
think that's-
changing on the site access, the size of the drive aisles, anything at all, site triangles, and the parking is significantly reduced, yes.
Okay, I
No-
just wanted to make sure I heard that correct.
Yeah. And then there's no change to any signage, right? All the signage is remaining the same. If anything, we might be removing
Correct.
some signage for the office.
Correct, there's no proposed signage.
Change.
Okay. And then as far as loading areas, it looks like there's one to the north side of that building. Is that correct? Or is there any new loading, or where is existing? How's it function? Are we anticipating any change to loading zones or loading areas?
There's no anticipated change to the site loading, how it occurs today. I'm not completely familiar with. I assume that the loading for the retail center is in the front, mainly in the front. There are access doors in back of the retail on the first floor. I think those are mainly fire code, and they're man doors, maybe 3 feet. So I would assume most of the loading occurs in the front or on the sides. But importantly, there's no change to any of that. The function of the site is going to remain exactly the same. You would access your unit and load just as you would any other facility like this. Come through the gate, get to the back, as I mentioned, all within a gated, secure area, and access your first floor unit today as they're doing, or access the second story.
Would there be loading at the elevator behind the building at the new building there where the bollards are?
Yeah, I think so. If I had a truckload of things, I would be coming around and getting as close to the elevator as I could. So there are.
Would you be willing to designate that as a loading zone there?
Yeah, we have no issue at all doing that. That's currently what it's used for. It doesn't interfere, I should mention, with the doors to the north or south in those extended sections of self-storage. The closest door is about 25 feet. So it's past the place where access to our new facility would be.
Okay.
Excuse me, will the office for the storage company remain in its present location?
Yes,
it
no
will.
change.
Okay, Charlie?
And then I don't know if, Todd, do you have anyone from the owner applicant that's going to talk about the operation or anything like that? Or can I ask my question?
We do have them on the line. We also did, Mike and I did review those questions with them, and we're prepared to testify as to those hours of operation, employees, visitors, all that stuff. Yeah, we can do that real quickly.
Okay.
Michael, what are the general operations of the office versus the storage?
As far as the operation of the storage, as I said, it's not changing. The hours of the facility are, excuse me 1 second.
My understanding, they're Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 for the office, and the storage is 6 to 10 p.m., 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Right.
For their
That's what I
non-business
have.
clients. And there's roughly about 5 clients that have 24-hour access because they have business operations that run 24 hours. Is that correct?
There's about, yes, that I have those notes exactly, 9 to 5 for the business office, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. for the gate itself, and about 10 business units in there that have 24-hour access. That being the only difference between the business and the residential.
And the maximum number of employees at any one time is 2 for the
2
storage facility, is that
employees.
correct?
Yes, 2 employees. Access is just by box trucks. There's nothing, no tractor trailers accessing the site.
And there's roughly about 15 visitors to the site per day, is that correct?
That's what, yes, we have, correct.
Okay. And as far as, where's my notes on this? Bear with me 1 second. You mentioned the site traffic was basically box trucks, pickup trucks and cars, no deliveries.
Correct.
Todd,
Yes.
real quick. I know you said no tractor trailers, but is there ample room? I know the site's big enough, but is there ample room? So like Mayflower, Beacon, or any of those, if they were actually moving somebody and they needed to rent a self-storage, is there room for those to maneuver back there?
I defer to Michael, but I don't know that there's ever been one on site.
I believe the owner did discuss that, and he indicated that there are no tractor trailers currently accessing the self-storage area. I would say that they could get to some of the units, but trying to get a tractor trailer to make that first turn to the north, he's going east and then around, might be difficult. I don't think that's the intention. I don't think they want that. 30-foot is all that goes in there.
Okay.
Yeah. I should mention the refuse too. The tenancy agreement, the tenants is that they are not allowed to utilize the refuse on site. The refuse on site is sized for the retail and the office. So that individual tenants would, even with this new addition, would not be allowed to, for example, take their things out of their unit and dump it into the dumpster. And there's signs on those refuse units out there to prevent that. It's also in
Michael, follow up to that. There's no vehicle or outside storage permitted either. Is that correct?
Correct. There is none.
And there was a question regarding the possibility of auctions on site. I believe the client indicated that they do have auctions for the units every 2 months, and that they have maybe 3 to 4 visitors at the time of those auctions, and they usually last about 1 hour. Is that correct?
That's what I have, correct. 3 to 4 bidders at one time. Every couple of months, they end up doing that. And I guess that suffices for taking care of the unpaid units.
And is there any new lighting going to be added to the back of the site?
Yeah, we're putting some lighting on the architectural lighting really for the pedestrian doors on either side of the proposed building. No other lighting than that. There's currently some lighting on the back of the building facing east, the existing building, but our proposal will conform to the lighting regulations in Howell Township for safety lighting and the intensity.
Excellent.
Now, the back there where this is being put in, what about the hair salon that's there and the other businesses and the air conditioning units that are along them back walls where this unit is going to be going? Is that all going to be relocated? The doors to the hair salon and all be?
There are no, and the architect can probably comment better, sir. There are no, as far as I know, proposals to relocate any of the pedestrian doors that I think are fire doors off the back of the building. As far as the compressors, yeah, there's a lot of them in the way, and they're all going to be taken out of there, obviously, and put on the second floor in a parapet on the roof of this unit.
On the roof, right?
Yes.
The architect will address that as well.
Charlie?
Yeah, and the last just general question I have is, as far as the storage, there's no like U-Haul rental vehicles or pod containers or anything like that, right?
No, there's nothing associated with the operation. No U-Haul, no.
All right. That is all I have for the time being.
Okay.
Any other questions of the engineer at this time?
Jennifer?
You mean no use?
No, I think that Charlie was pretty comprehensive, and I don't really have any questions for the engineer. I'm going to wait for the planning testimony.
Okay.
When you mean U-Hauls, what are you referring to? I mean, the reason I know so much is I had a storage in that place for like 10 years.
Right.
And we would have people with a U-Haul, not a trailer truck, and they would come in there.
Right. Now you can bring your own U-Haul truck in, but we don't operate a U-Haul rental. We don't rent U-Hauls out of that
Is that what you
facility.
mean? Oh, yeah, okay, fine.
And they're not doing any pod storage containers or anything like that where they're going to be stored outside or anything like that.
Correct. No outside storage.
That's all I have for Mr.
Mr. Hughes?
No, sir. So far, I'm good.
Okay, Mr. O'Donnell?
Mr. Chairman, I'm good so far.
Okay, Mr. Martins?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to follow up what you were saying about the, you'd only be using that new construction entrance in the back only to bring something there. You wouldn't be using that. You'd be parking on the side and using the north and south entrance to actually get to your unit. Because, I mean, for walking purposes, you wouldn't walk all the way around and come down one of those, you know. So it would just be for unloading there, basically.
Correct. And basically just for upstairs.
Just
Okay,
the
so
second
there's no
floor
reason to
access.
park in there
Yeah.
for more than just time it takes to unload.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I have.
So Todd, just one last comment real quick. So the fire official obviously said that all access ways need to be maintained, you know, with Knox boxes and stuff like that. So the gate that goes into the back, that's got a Knox box on it already?
Are you asking me that?
Yeah. And if not, will can one be provided?
Absolutely.
And then also for any entrances to the second floor, you know, from the retail side, if they need to get in from the retail side.
I think the idea from the retail side, when phase 3 is complete, is that the retail would not have access to the storage units. It would be a keypad so you can get up to your storage unit, but the retail and the storage would not be, they're not related.
What about the elevator from the retail side to get to the second story? What about the
Well, we're still,
elevator?
until phase 3 is complete, there will be offices upstairs, so you'll need that for that.
Okay, but what
But when
happens
phase
to the
3 is complete, the idea is that there'll be no more access to the self-storage from the retail.
But you will still, are y'all gonna remove the elevator that's existing?
No, I think we need that, I'm sorry, I think we need that for ADA compliance.
That's for ADA compliance. It'll stay.
So there will be access through the retail side though,
But it,
still.
yes, but not for the retail tenants. It would be for the
for
access to
ADA.
upstairs.
Right.
The physical access will remain. I think that's the
Right.
point, but you'll have a PIN code access for
Correct.
security. Right, so they won't be able to get up there.
Now,
Yeah, I wasn't
would-
clear on that, sorry.
Would there be provided fire access through that at any time?
You asking me or Mike?
Mike,
Uh, Fire access through the first floor
ADA,
retail to the
yeah.
the ADA?
yeah, through
I
that
mean-
ADA to the second story.
I am sure that the fire official is going to do whatever he feels he needs to do. As we mentioned, the ADA compliance needs to be maintained, so the elevator will stay. Knock boxes on the PIN code gates to allow fire personnel up there. I think that would be all they would need.
Well, would
I
they need a
believe.
keypad to gain entrance to that rear elevator?
Well, no, I don't think so. I'm not sure that those doors are going to be locked
There's a
because
stairwell there too.
the gates are locked and with PIN code access for the hours we mentioned. I think it was 6 a.m. to 10.
Okay.
So
Could-
they
could
would
we
have
get-
knockbox access to those gates and then access into, if I'm not mistaken, into the masonry building we're proposing as well.
Okay, but that won't be locked. There won't be a keypad at that point, correct?
The owner has not indicated to us that he is locking that. I'm sorry if maybe we can find out, but I don't believe that's the case.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I would just say for the retail entrance with the elevator, I think some means, they have to provide some means of just fire access for the fire official, whether it's, providing the PIN code or some type of separate knock system to get in there, because it is going to be PIN restricted. Just so that way, I have a hard time finding a fire truck going all the way around to the back of the site and then coming in, in between all those different storage. It's probably easier for them to come in from the front and try to get up through there. So
right.
I
That's
just
why I was asking that question.
satisfy the fire official as a condition of the approval with fire access. I think is
It is on the letter, Mr. Chairman. I'm reading it right now, that they have to have
No,
access.
Okay, Mr. Cantor,
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Saya.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Wow. Let's see here. Mr. Gonzalez,
No questions, no comments, Mr. Chairman, but thank you.
Mr. Orozco.
No questions.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, in that case, I'd like to bring on our architect, if that's okay.
Okay, do we want to open to public for questions of Mr. Intelli,
That's up to you.
Mr. Tropley?
I think, given the lack of public participation that I see, I think we should do all the witnesses first and then open it
Okay.
up.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Cohen?
Dan, you there?
Yes, I am.
Could you put your name again on the record and your affiliation and your educational and professional qualifications as an architect, please?
Absolutely. So Dan Governelli, Barlow Governelli and Associates Architects, located at 92 Mantoloking Road in Brick, New Jersey. Licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, have a bachelor's of architecture from NJIT.
We accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan, could you just briefly give the board an idea of the architectural makeup of the proposed elevator and stairway addition that we're proposing this evening?
Absolutely. So the existing building and the existing self-storage wings to the rear of the structure are remaining in terms of volume, in terms of aesthetics. We are proposing to construct the 19-foot by 21-foot vertical circulation element, which would house a new elevator that is predominantly used for lifting storage and belongings up to the second floor. It's sized appropriately, similar to a service elevator. It's larger in size than the current elevator that we had available to us in the center of the building. And then the additional means of egress through stairwell was not necessarily required by code, but because of access and because of loading at that area, we chose to include that component as well. The building is a two-story structure to the west, and to the east it contains one-story self-storage fingers, if you want to call them that. On the first floor, just to bring to your attention, on the south side of the building, that one stairwell that is in the southeast corner of the existing building does contain a fire department connection point, and I believe that there is access for the firemen to come in on that south side. To the east of the existing first floor, there is actually a service corridor that runs the distance of the building that all of the tenants back up to. So no tenant or no retail tenant in the building has direct exterior access to the east. They only have access to that service corridor, and that connects both stairwells on the first floor to the fire department connection to the south, as well as connecting both stairwells. And then the other circulation component that is going to remain is a doorway on the first floor with a hallway that leads to the elevator and the stair, which is in the center of the building. That is not in communication with any retail tenant. That's a separate entrance that is dedicated solely to the second floor, and there's no other doors that enter into an adjacent retail space. So that is a private entrance, if you want to call it that. So on the second floor, we are proposing in 3 phases as described by the engineer. The development of the second floor for self-storage. Reasons for that involve phasing over time to be able to move the tenants out of the second floor, as well as perform some structural improvements to the building that will be required to include the self-storage on the second floor. So this phasing plan was developed by looking at the leases on the first floor and coming up with a time period to work on the structure and stabilize it and increase its capacity for the self-storage component.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Is there any way we can get these plans on the screen? Because I know there's not many people in the audience, but if there were, it's very difficult to follow along with what you're saying without seeing the plans.
A7, I believe, are the architecturals.
Okay, hold on one second. Just don't ask me to Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah, does that help?
I mean, I have the plans in front of me, but if anybody is watching and is interested in this application, it's a lot easier to follow along if the plans are up.
Okay. So to the right side of the plan, starting from the bottom, is the phase 1 second floor plan, indicating approximately half of the second floor being utilized for self-storage and the south half being utilized as current office space. Phase 2 is self-storage to the north, and then additional self-storage to the south, and reducing the office area slightly in the center. Phase 3 is 100% usage of the second floor as self-storage, fully populated with lockers and corridors. To the left side of the page is the blow-up details of the 19 by 21 addition for the vertical circulation. There's a roof plan shown there indicating how we're going to reorganize the condensers on the roof. And then there's a key plan to the top left of the page as well. On the second page, from the exterior, we are not making any alterations to the western facade, which faces Route 9 currently. All of the windows, the signage, the materials, and all of the building components will remain as they are today. The side elevations are to the north and to the south. We're eliminating the windows on the second floor. They will be filled in with a stucco finish painted to match the existing building. And that was because of the lockers that are indicated on those walls. And then to the north side of the building, right around the center, would be the new vertical circulation element constructed of masonry block, painted to match the block that's at the north side of the building today, approximately 27 feet above grade. And dashed in on the elevations are the condensers behind the parapet wall. So the parapet wall extends up to screen the condensers as well as the overrun on the elevator, which is required at the top of the elevator shaft. So architecturally, we're blending in with the materials that are presently on site and making only limited modification to the south and north elevations.
Thank you. Any questions of the architect?
I'm gonna ask Jen to jump in because she's usually the one that has the questions for the architect.
I mean, it's a little different. It's a little different in this particular instance because, you know, it's an existing shopping center that already has, you know, obviously the architecture is there, and this is a modest addition in the back that no one is going to be able to even see. But I will say that it's a little difficult with given the plans, just because I really, you know, the floor plans are one thing, but the renderings in black and white make it difficult to assess. Like, I know you say it's going to look like the other building, but it would have been much more helpful if we had something in color. You know, what is the length of the wall that, if you're looking at the east elevation, what's the length of the wall of the new building?
So that wall is 19 feet in width.
So it wouldn't be subject to our architectural standards, Mr. Chair, because that's every 50 feet. So this is obviously significantly less than that. And then as long as there's a commitment to kind of mirror the existing architecture, I don't take any exception to it.
Okay.
Dan, you okay with that?
Yes, I would agree that we are matching and mirroring the existing aesthetic of the building.
Can we get the board back? There we go. Okay, Charlie, do you have any further questions of the architect?
I do not.
Okay, Mr. Hughes,
Nope, good so far, sir.
Mr. O'Donnell.
I'm good. I mean, it's a pre-existing building and it's just a minimum upgrade to it. So I don't have any questions.
Mr. Merton,
I'm good.
Mr. Moretti,
I'm good.
Mr. Cantor,
No question, sir.
Mr. Sayah.
You know, sir, the question I have is, you're going to relocate all of the package units up onto the roof. And my concern would be, if you're doing such, you know, then you're going to have the direct sunlight hitting it, the UV rays. So are we going to provide any sort of packaging protection for these units that are going to be relocated? Over.
We didn't have any protection included in our design. The condensers are permitted to be exposed to outdoor air. The length of the line sets actually would be reduced in the relocation of the units as they do feed second floor air handlers. So I did not include any additional protection for them.
You know, Mike, so a follow-up to that is, down in Florida, I know this is not Florida, but we put a lot of units up on the roof, right? And after it takes a lot of beating, they become very noisy at times. So, my concern is, we don't just throw stuff up there and 5 years later, everything's rattling around, humming and so forth, becoming a noise hazard. Just whatever you can do to think about that. Over.
Very good. We will absolutely include that in our plan.
Is that it, Mr. Saya?
That's it.
Okay, Mr. Roscoe,
I'm okay.
Mr. Gonzalez.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Neither do I. Okay, Mr. Cohen.
Then we have one last witness, Mr. Andy Janu, our planner. He's been previously sworn. Andy, you there? I think you have to unmute yourself.
Got it.
There we go.
Good evening.
Andy, could you put your professional and educational qualifications on the record as professional planner, please?
Certainly. My name is Andrew Janu. I'm a principal at the firm of Beacon Planning and Consulting Services, 315 Highway 34 in Colts Neck, New Jersey. I am a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, as well as a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I'm currently serving as the planner for the borough of Carteret, as well as redevelopment consultant to Keyport, Livingston, South Amboy, Toms River, and Plainsboro. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from the New Jersey Institute of Technology. I've testified throughout the state of New Jersey as a planner and have been recognized as an expert in land use planning by the Superior Court of the state of New Jersey.
We accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andrew, you're obviously familiar with the project and you reviewed Jen Beam's letter with regard to the planning issues. Could you please address the D2 variance that we requested this evening?
Certainly. In preparation for this evening, I've been to the site. I've reviewed Ms. Beam's letters as well as the T&M letter, as well as your ordinance and your master plan re-examinations, and the history of approvals on this site. As this board knows, this property was subject of an April 2000 approval wherein the use variance was granted for the self-storage facility. What we're seeking tonight is an expansion of that non-conforming use. So we are seeking a D2 variance, and I'll explain the difference between the 2000 application and the D2 tonight. First, I'd just like to go through just a couple of the items leading up to this. I had mentioned that I looked at your master plan and your ordinances. Your master plan recognizes this as the highway HD1 district, and in fact, I'm sorry, HC1 district, HD1, I'm sorry, highway commercial district. And the plan calls it an area focused along Route 9 with the intent to provide highway-oriented development along the corridor on larger lots. And that is the fact of what we have here. We have a mixed-use retail commercial development. And the fact of the matter is, over the years, we've had certain elements of this property that are thriving, and the office has been waning. Second floor office over retail is difficult in good economies, but we're seeking to revitalize the site consistent with the recommendations in your most recent reexamination, which talks about taking techniques to revitalize, I think the words are underutilized properties. So we're seeking to revitalize the underutilized second story with the self-storage, which we found to be successful at the site. In the 2000 application, the site was found to be particularly suited to the use, and the configuration of the site was found to be particularly suited, not only because of the highway access and the frontage of the highway, but because of the configuration of the buildings that were already there. What we're seeking to do today is to take existing space over the retail units, reconfigure that to self-storage in 3 phases, and to put a modest addition to the back, which will house a staircase and an elevator, which is really going to be dedicated to access to the self-storage unit. So In terms of the D2 variance that's being requested this evening, as the board knows, a D2 variance differs from a D1 in that the use has already been accepted on the site. So the focus of the D2 is on the impact of the use on the site and whether the site can accommodate the additional facilities that are being proposed in this expansion. Given that this is an existing space that's being reconfigured, you've heard testimony from our engineer, Mr. Ental, regarding the diminished intensity of use that's going to be encountered through this. There'll be a significant reduction in the amount of parking that'll be required. There'll be a significant reduction in terms of trips, particularly peak hour trips because of the hours of operation here. I would venture to say that when looking at this, this will be a substantially easy addition to absorb onto this property because of the less intense utilization of the property by this use. I believe that's been demonstrated throughout the successful history of the operation of this property since that 2000 introduction of the use, and I believe that this facility will actually thrive because of this new addition. With respect to the D2 variance, we also have to talk about the negative criteria, the negative prongs with respect to whether this will create any substantial detriment to the neighbors or to the community. I don't believe it will because it'll be less intense. Whether it'll have a detrimental impact on your ordinance or master plan. Again, your master plan seeks to revitalize underutilized property. And given that this use was already found to be particularly suited to this property and that what we're proposing will replace a use that was operating at a more intense use and this new use will operate, I believe, at a significantly reduced intensity than some of the uses that would be permitted otherwise within the HC1 zone. I would venture to say this would not be a detriment to either your zone plan or your master plan, and in fact would assist in the operation of the property to be less of a intensity and less of an impact on the neighborhood. We also look to the purposes of zoning and what would be promoted through this. There are several which I think would apply here, if you bear with me. As you know, the purposes of zoning are found in the MLUL under 4055D, and these are the reasons why the board should consider variances if any of these are being promoted. They're listed by letter, but reading those into the record in terms of what would apply on this property, I would opine that A, encouraging the appropriate use of land. Again, we have the use on this property. It's configured along a highway access. There's a similar use across Highway 9 to this in the ice storage facility that's at the intersection to the south of us, I believe. So I do believe that this is an appropriate location for this use. G, to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, commercial, and industrial uses, both public and private. Again, the attributes of this site were previously found to be particularly suited for this use. That will continue here. Sorry. M, to encourage the coordination of various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with a view of lessening the cost of such development and to the more efficient use of land. Again, the infrastructure is here, as evidenced by the fact that we're doing very little disruptive work to this property in order to accommodate this use. This is a very efficient revitalization of the property by taking the building envelope and introducing a new use with a very modest approximate 400 square foot addition. There'll be some relocation of some condenser units and some HVAC equipment to the roof, but that'll still be well under the height requirements within this district. So I do believe it's a very efficient application in terms of disruption to the property, in terms of disruption to any infrastructure. And having said that, I believe we do meet all the tests for D2 use variance to be applied here, and that this is actually a good application that'll help this property thrive long-term.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions of our planner?
Jennifer?
I don't really have any questions. I think that, you know, the testimony that's been provided meets the statutory criteria. It, like, as we said earlier, when we were talking about the architecture, it's a modest addition to an existing shopping center in the rear. The site has received approval in the past for the self-storage. And so and I do agree that the office market is shrinking, and self-storage is a use that will kind of bring the balance of this building into utilization. So I don't take an exception to the D2 variance that's being requested.
Thank you. Charlie?
Mr. Chair, not a question for Mr. Jenny, but a clarification for Mr. Cohen. So in the application submittal, some of the drawings say lots 41, 42, and 43. Some of the site plans just say lot 41. Are these lots all consolidated, or what's the status of that?
Charlie, good question. I have tried to check that. I did do a deed search. I can't find one. I was unable to get past Monmouth County back through 1987. I think in the 87 resolution, there was a condition of consolidation, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if it happened or not. I did spend about half an hour, have my office researching it today. I'm gonna have to have my title company look at it, but real simple. I don't think it's a problem if it's something.
Yeah, I would just say either provide documentation to the board that it's already consolidated, if not consolidate as a condition of the approval.
Not a problem.
And then obviously just make sure that any other like deed restrictions that were required for prior land use approvals are, you know, have been filed or in good standing. I think there was like a no build zone with the White Castle that's shown on the survey.
On the White Castle site plan, there was in fact a no build zone outlined on the site plan. I don't know if I could not find a deed that they recorded it, but I will again double check.
That is all I had, Mr. Chair. And then actually just one last thing, Todd, just once the consolidation does go through, just revise the site plans for whatever the final lot designation. And then I have some minor plat comments in item C that are indicated. They're pretty straightforward. It's just clerical stuff. Mike, you don't have any issue with any of those?
I do not.
Okay.
We'll take care of those. Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hughes,
Sorry, sir. Me?
do you have any questions or?
No, sir,
comments?
not at this time. Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Mr. Chairman, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mertens?
Mr. Chairman, I'm good too.
Mr. Moretti?
I'm good also.
Mr. Sayah?
Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, it's Charlie, for Charlie and for the applicant. You know, that second floor that you're going to be converting from office space to storage, is there going to be any load restrictions, or are they going to beef up the floor structure? Over.
Really think that's a question for the architect.
Yes.
Great. Dan, you on?
Yep, I just unmuted. So in my direct, I did say because of the phasing, the structural capacity of the building will be increased for the self-storage to the building code requirements for storage. And that's a lot to do with the phasing and the timing to have access to the retail tenant spaces to the first floor.
Roger. Got it. Thank you.
Is that it, Ms. Sayah?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Rusko?
I'm okay.
Mr. Cantor?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gonzalez?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, neither do I.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation.
Okay, well, at this time, I will take a motion to open the public for questions and comments to the witnesses and the applicant.
I make a motion, we open to the public.
Who was that?
Moretti.
Mr. Moretti, motion? Do I
I'll
have a
second
second?
it.
Seconded by Mr. O'Donnell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Oh, okay, Eileen will open for questions and comments to any of the applicants professionals here.
For any members of the public on this hearing, the chairman has opened up the hearing for any questions or comments of this applicant. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. You will need to be sworn in, give your name and address, and you need audio and video. And that is for questions and comments of this applicant. And I don't believe there are any. I believe they are the applicants themselves that are on the call.
Okay. One more time, any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. We have none.
None.
I'll take a motion to close to the public portion.
I'll make a motion.
I second it.
Motion by Mr. Hughes, seconded by Mr. Moretti. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Mr. Cohen, you want to give us a summation?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, I mean, this is basically substituting a self-storage use for an office use in an existing shopping center, which over time is going to have less impact on the site and a decrease in traffic. I think our experts have laid out the justifications for the D2 variance. There's no impact on any of our neighbors. There's no impact on any of our existing tenants. And I would ask that the board grant the application as presented this evening.
Charlie, you have any further questions or comments?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Jennifer, do you have any further questions, comments?
No, Mr. Chair.
Any board members? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, in the case of case number BA 20-115, it seems like this particular application doesn't have much of an impact on anything and is just kind of expanding an existing situation there, existing business with minimal changes. I vote to approve.
Have a motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, have a second by Mr. Roscoe.
Yep.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Chairman Nansen.
I agreed with my board members. I think this is a good application. It's gonna very much lessen the intensity of the use of the property for starters. You're gonna have less traffic going in and out. You're going from, if I recall, 90-something parking spaces down to 6. So, you know, I really do agree. I think this is a good revitalization of a property to make it more viable. And so my vote is yes also.
Motion carries. Application's approved.
Okay.
Thank you
Good
very
luck,
much,
Mr.
Mr.
Cohen.
Chairman, all
Thank you.
professionals, and I just want to wish everybody very happy and healthy holidays.
You
Thank
too.
you, sir.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Okay. At this time, do you want to just go ahead?
Yeah, Ron.
Let's approve the voucher that we have. Can I have a motion to approve the
I
voucher?
make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Motion
I'll
by
second
Mr.
it.
Hurt, seconded by Mr. O'Donnell. Can we have a roll call or just a yay or nay?
I can do a roll call. Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mertens,
Yes.
Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Sayer,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, at this time, let me get my agenda. Let's review the year-end review. And
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may. As I had mentioned earlier, I hope to keep this to 10 minutes or so. Unfortunately, the version that was transmitted to the board by myself, not blaming anyone else, was merely a draft and not complete. So what I'd like to do is move forward through what I have in front of me, which is the actual draft, the actual final product, which I am intended to present. I'm going to start and I'm going to read it as quickly as I can. If anybody needs to stop me, please do. The intention is at the end of this, if there's no questions, this can be approved and I'll forward it to the board tomorrow for execution.
Ron, I know you're going to read that, but I know it's done by numbers or categories there. Read the number and then read that category and let's see if we have any questions on, go it by numbers, please.
Well, some of these are pickups from the previous year. If you give me a moment, I'll try to identify where they were.
No, that's okay. Read the resolution, but just go, step by step through it.
Right, but it's different. I think the numbers are different on.
No, I'm not worried. Don't worry about the numbers. We're going to go on what you're saying.
Okay. Well, the first paragraph incorporates the attached 2020 Annual Zoning Board of Adjustment Report, which is the cases that Eileen had prepared. That'll be attached to this resolution.
And I will adjust it for the applications through tonight that have been approved.
Right. So the new paragraph 2 deals with once applications are deemed complete by the board engineer and scheduled for hearing. This is a repeat from last year. The application couldn't be heard due to applicants' failures to respond to board professionals' review letters or provide requested information. We've incorporated that from last year, noting it's an excessive waste of time and delay to the board's calendar, and particularly now when the board is conducting virtual hearings due to the pandemic. This is language right from the resolution. Once again, we're asking for the application checklist to include a provision for professionals' review meetings for major applications to resolve any open issues or concerns, with the board professionals determining if the application is ripe for full board consideration. It should be part of the completeness process, and such meeting should take place not later than 2 weeks prior to the scheduled hearing date, with the applicant responsible for payment of the board professional fees. Next paragraph is all plan revisions which are recommended by the board professionals must be completed and submitted not later than 10 days prior to the hearing of the application. The board reserves the right to adjourn the hearing of the application on its own motion should the applicant not be in compliance with this requirement. I'm now moving on to number 3.
Okay, Ron, let's see if there's any questions on that one there. Mr. Saya, you have any questions on that? Any of the board members have any questions?
No,
sir.
No, Mr. Chairman, that's clear, and it's up front and early, so that's good. Let's
Perfect.
move on to the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, number 3 deals with buffers. The ordinance regarding buffers should be reviewed to clearly indicate that setbacks be measured from the applicable property line. It is recommended that setbacks not be included in applicable buffer requirements. And additionally, buffers should not be measured across roadways. That's something we talked about before. With respect to language in the ordinance regarding conservation easements, and again, parenthetically, the board will remember the Leone case. But anyhow, I didn't put that in. Removal of the language should be considered, and a generic reference to buffers such as perimeter buffer, farmland buffer, or buffer easement language should be instead utilized. And for some of the new members who may not be aware of this, the board notes that conservation easements are subject to Green Acres jurisdiction. And if approvals were granted by the board to permit structures to remain within the easement, once again, that particular case, the township would be obligated to obtain replacement property on a 20-to-1 ratio, representing a tremendous financial hardship for taxpayers. Next paragraph would be, in circumstances where a farmland buffer is required, the replanting of the buffer and removal of dead vegetation shall be required of the applicant in coordination with the board certified tree expert. That was a new thing we had discussed at our meeting. Additional considerations on buffer ordinance modifications would include a possible sunset provision in an approving resolution in cases where a residential use in a non-residential zone is eliminated. Similarly, a sunset provision for a farmland buffer requirement should be considered when an adjacent farm is no longer in operation. The elimination of buffers around major subdivisions where it abuts a residential use such as a major subdivision to major subdivision should also be considered. So that's the buffer part of our recommendation.
Any questions or comment on that?
It sounds clear. It reads clear. It's got to be clear to the board.
A
So
lot clearer than what I sent you, Mr. Say. I'm sorry to say, and this will be published tomorrow. Okay, number 4. This deals with the Airbnb rentals, which was in last year's resolution. The town does not have any regulations or definitions regarding short-term rentals, such as Airbnb rentals, which fall into this category. Consideration needs to be given to inspection requirements for these units to reflect generally the present township requirements regarding residential rentals. These units are located in stable residential neighborhoods, and the township should take into consideration the impact upon the neighborhoods and year-round residents. Howell Township should create an ordinance by which short-term rentals are permitted with an annual fee of $100 for the annual landlord registration and $100 for an annual rental certificate application. And these are the same costs that a landlord would bear in obtaining a new tenant on a yearly basis. The township would inspect the short-term rental property on a yearly basis rather than every time a short-term tenant vacates the property to ensure compliance with code requirements. And again, this was picked up verbatim from last year in our 2019.
And this is something that is basically flaming across the country with other townships, cities, and so forth. You know, it was in the Wall Street Journal, I believe, that brought it to light that Airbnb is, you know, they're basically having to deal with all of this. And, you know, many of the towns are starting to clamp down on what's going on. Over.
Okay.
Any questions from the board?
Has the township council taken action on that?
This is a request or a report to the council, what our recommendations are, you know, as far as moving forward with any ordinances or changes in ordinances. This is what this review is for.
The reason I asked is because Mr. Tropoli mentioned that it was in last year's review as well.
Yeah, they haven't moved.
They
forward.
haven't acted, and they don't have to act. It's just a recommendation to them based on what we see, and it's their choice whether they act on it or not. There's a number of items that have been in there forever, like as long as, you know, as long as we've been doing this.
Right.
So sometimes they just choose not to pursue something.
Point taken. Understood.
I don't know if this is the area or not, but what about when someone has tenants living in their house and they're, say, their family, and they're really tenants, and if you watch the location, you see different people coming in, but when our land use people go to check it out, they say they're relatives. Is there anything we could do with that?
No.
Nothing the board can do about it. That's unfortunate.
So is there anything we can send to the township for them to do about it?
No.
No, I mean,
It's kind of outside of our. It's kind of outside of our lane, honestly.
Yeah. It's not on our wheelhouse, unfortunately.
Well, which board can we go to at that?
It's not a board. It's a code enforcement issue.
Right.
And they have been out on numerous occasions. And if people are not honest, there's limited, you know, there's limited things that we can do. But it's a code enforcement issue. It's not a board issue.
Okay. It might also be a Board of Education issue where they send investigators out to see who's actually living there and who's in the school system, in the school. But again, it's not within our purview, unfortunately. But,
okay.
You know,
Next item.
Good point. Okay, Mr. Chair, may I continue?
Yes, sir. Next item.
Okay, thank you. I'm on paragraph 5 now. And this is one that's been in for years. According to section 188-79, paren 6, closed paren multi-tenant structures in the SED zone shall be devoted to a single unit, provided, however, that in buildings with a gross floor area in excess of 40,000 square feet, multiple tenants shall be permitted, provided the minimum tenant space shall not be less than 5,000 square feet. We see a number of cases like this. So the recommendation is that the elimination of this requirement as it relates to the minimum 5,000 square feet per user space for buildings exceeding 40,000 square feet should also be considered. The trend that we see is the board sees as users operating out of smaller spaces, particularly where service type uses are contemplated. As to parking considerations, requirements can be based upon square footage of the proposed individual unit and the particular use for the unit. The board also recommends that the township adopt the definition of the term flex space and incorporate a parking standard for same. That's pretty much been repeated verbatim year after year after year.
I
Hasn't
would
been.
like, are we gonna set any type of minimum square footage? Jennifer?
My recommendation is no.
Okay.
You
Got it.
have users that, you know, could operate efficiently in a 5,000 square foot space. You know, I don't think it's necessary, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you could have somebody operating in a 500 square foot space.
Yeah.
And plenty of room for, you know, electronic repair or something, something of a much smaller nature. So I think that's a good recommendation not to
Okay.
do that.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on this item?
No.
Okay. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving forward, just very briefly, this was something that Matt had asked to be kept in. The board suggests the requirements for placement of generators in small sheds be established to eliminate the need for variance or site plan review prior to installation. I mean, this is something that we see from year to year. You know, why should we penalize a homeowner to come in if it's not necessary? Where, you know, Matt, you know, can possibly do a desk review of something like this and save the amount of money that someone would need and the time to come to the board. That was a repeat from last year.
Any questions? Okay, next item.
Right, seeing none, thanks. This is now the new number 7. The size of accessory structures in the R2, 3, 4, and R50 zones should be limited with respect to overall height and area. The board recommends that accessory structures in these zones be no higher than 15 feet max to the peak and contain no more than 400 square feet in total area. I believe, Jen, you had made that recommendation.
Paul did. I think it
Right.
was Paul.
Well, Jen did it last time during our review, and we adopted it, right?
Right.
I mean, we had it in our plan, but it still hasn't been codified in the ordinance. They have, the governing body hasn't acted on it.
We'll put it out again for them. The
That's
chair.
good. Anybody have any questions? No.
Okay.
Next item.
This is, number 8, I brought back the lighting requirements. I know this is something that we almost invariably waive. So I languaged it like this. The lighting requirements set forth in ordinance section 188-22 provides that a ground level light intensity shall be a minimum of 0.3 foot candles anywhere and shall average a maximum of 0.5 foot candles over the entire area. These standards are impractical for an applicant to obtain, and as such, the board has been granting waivers of this requirement. The ordinance should be revised to reflect current industry standards, including LED lighting. And as a little tip of the hat to Charlie, I wrote in here, when applicable, lighting intensity should be not greater than 3000 K. That means Kelvin, of course. And when applicable, obviously, that is your commercial type lighting, I would think, Charlie, more than anything.
Yeah, you see the car dealerships like to put those in there, right? Real blue lights, and it's good for them, but causes a glare for, you know, people driving by.
Okay. And that was the lighting requirement, Mr. Chair.
Any comments on that?
Nope.
Okay, next item.
Thank you, sir. This is down number 9. We're coming to the end, folks. In cases where a municipal subdivision such as police and fire department authorities are seeking variance or other relief before the board, such applications should be sent to the planning board for capital review. The elimination of a zoning board appearance is appropriate and a desirable result in cases of these kinds. This was a verbatim from last year, kept it in, no changes.
That's good to me. Board? Okay, next
Okay.
item.
The final one, again, a tip of the hat to Charlie on the new state stormwater regulations, because, I don't know how up to date they are. But, by way of whether or not Joe Clark is aware of this, about promulgating an ordinance, but here it is anyway. The board notes the new state stormwater regulations are to come into effect on March 2, 2021. Municipalities have until that date to adopt the new state model ordinance or face penalties for operating under an old ordinance. As such, the township is obligated to adopt the state new model ordinance by March 2nd, 2021. As a review process, the township should consider the following enhancements to the ordinance. A, lowering the threshold of major development to capture additional development for regulation. B, if the township decides to keep the current threshold of major development at 1 acre of land disturbance and 0.25 acre of new impervious surface, consider adding the definition and requirements of minor development and establish a sensible threshold to capture additional development for regulation. Charlie, that was your baby.
Yeah, and this is just really, we get a lot of these non-conforming residential on Route 9 that they want to repurpose the site for commercial use, and they're really right under the threshold for major development, and really they can put in a parking area and dump all the water onto another property onto Route 9 without any stormwater management. Just trying to maybe get something a little bit more prescriptive from stormwater management perspective, so it's not kind of fighting with the board and myself on what needs to be provided or not. So not trying to put an additional burden on residential properties with these unreasonable, but maybe 5,000, 6,000 square feet to kind of, capture a little bit more stormwater and, mitigate any negative impacts. And it's just a recommendation. I provided some documentation to the engineering department, food for thought, and it's really, governing body is the one that makes the decision and adopts the ordinance.
But also, Charlie, it's compliance with the March 2nd requirement, right?
Yeah, so without a doubt, the state model ordinance has to be adopted by March 2nd. The suggestions that I had are just if they want to take it a little bit step further, maybe capture a little bit more development. Containing more stormwater runoff is, always a good thing. But obviously, like I said, we don't want to put a burden on these small residential applications. So.
And Mr. Chair, that's it. That's the new resolution. And I believe it embodies everything that the Rules Committee spoke of.
Yep.
New and old. And again,
I agree.
so
And I'm going to make a suggestion that we do, I don't know what the new year upholds, but, if I am back, I would like us, the Rules Committee, to meet, and I would like to amend our rules as far as every year we do our review, just like we just went through, line item by line item with the whole board. That way we're just not voting on a resolution that's there, but everybody has a chance to understand or ask questions of each item through there. I think this worked out really good in a bad sort of way, but I think it worked out real good because I think there's more of an explanation to our review letter that's going to the council this way. And because whenever this is discussed, it's just the Rules Committee. It's just 3 board members and our professionals that put this together, and we're sending this out, before the end of the year to vote on, and really not getting any input from other board members. I think this works out good. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, as a relatively new board member, I did not know that we did this. And
yes, we've done this every year for the past 20 years.
It's mandated, but you will.
It's mandated.
It's a great summation because there are issues that come up throughout the year that I just heard that we're looking to correct. And
everyone's
taking notes. Well, we got Paul Saya to thank for this. I've got to, I really, he caught it I usually don't print these out until just before the meeting and then I review it. But Mr. Sayed caught it earlier today and we both reached out to Mr. Tropoli and that's why we're doing it this way. But my suggestion is we do this every year this way. And
As long as I press the right button and everybody gets the right resolution.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, dealing with the lights, we're always talking about the lights that, Charlie talks about with the standards of LEDs. That's awesome to have.
Yeah.
so
Especially the LEDs are constantly improving too and producing
Yeah.
more power. Yeah.
It's awesome.
So, Mr. Chair, I offer this resolution for the board's consideration and hopefully adoption. And if so, I will get the final version, which I've read to the board, to Eileen tomorrow for execution.
Yeah, well, see, not only that, if anybody from the public is viewing this, they better understand what we're submitting to the council for review. They see what the board's all about. So anyway, at this time, I'll take a motion if someone's leaning forward to give a motion to
Mr.
accept
Chairman?
your review.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
provided that Ms. Beam concurs with all that is on paper, I'd like to make a motion to move this forward, adopting this yearly review for council's consideration.
I'd like to second that.
Ms. Beam, do you concur?
I do.
Okay. Okay, I got a motion by Mr. Asaya, seconded by Mr. Hughes. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco. You're
Yes.
muted. Thank you, Jose.
Okay.
Mr. Saya
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes, thank you, Ron. And
Very
thank you, Paul. I really appreciate your due diligence there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I want to wish everybody a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate. I, don't want to leave anybody out. It's been a pleasure serving with you guys. It's been one hell of a year. Pardon me, but it really has. It's been a detriment. And the one I really want to thank the most is the one right up in the top left-hand corner that I'm looking at. Eileen, you're a stormtrooper. And I'll tell you what, lady, you deserve whatever you need, you deserve it. And
Eileen, what do you need?
This has been a very trying year, and I'll tell you what, you've been a stormtrooper. I mean, you kept everything up, and Matt Howard also. He's been a trooper. Getting in there and getting us on these Zoom meetings, and it has not been easy at all. For you
Not
guys.
going away anytime soon.
No, but I want to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, man. It's we're just
The only thing I missed was those cakes.
Oh, man.
You
Had to bring
get
up the-
you now.
you did have to bring that up. But
The rum
everybody,
balls I miss.
I
Love them cakes.
Meeting.
I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to a better 2021.
Yes,
You know,
sir.
I'm hoping. That's what I'm praying for. So,
Yeah.
you guys have a good holidays and Merry Christmas.
Feliz
Same to
Navidad.
you.
Merry Christmas to all, happy holidays, and it's been a pleasure working with everyone.
Yes.
Yes.
Same here. Same here.
When is the next meeting?
January 11th.
11th.
11. Okay.
That's our reorg meeting. And if you're up for election or up to be reappointed, make sure you get your applications in. before January 1st.
When is that all decided?
At the
Reorganization.
reorg, which is going to be January the 5th.
Yeah, at the council meeting.
Yes.
Guys, I'll take at this time a motion. And thank you once again for this year. I know it's been trying and, you know, we've done a lot of meetings this year. And I appreciate Mr. Saya backing me up on all of them.
Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Merton.
Chair, for your hard work too, Mr. Chair, and your guidance.
Well,
And-
I wouldn't do it if it wasn't for you guys, you know.
And your
and
due
I-
diligence.
So, anyway, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion to adjourn, sir.
Back
Motion
on.
by Mr. Hughes, seconded by Mr. Roscoe. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Good night, and happy Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, guys. I'll see y'all in 2021.
Same to you and
Be
everybody.
safe.
Yes, sir.
Take care, everyone. Happy holidays. Merry
Right.
Christmas. Stay healthy.
You too.